Hi, and welcome to EdTech Bytes, Generative Artificial Intelligence, a four-part series exploring the conversations that have surfaced at the intersection of AI and education due to recent advancements in generative AI technology. Please join the conversation on social media, especially on LinkedIn. There's a lot of activity happening on LinkedIn. The hashtag AI for adult ed. So we would love to hear from you guys. Go to LinkedIn or any social media platform and use that hashtag to share your ideas, reflections, and thoughts. Throughout this series, we've heard from some interesting perspectives and use cases for generative AI, starting with zero to hero. I showed some ways that I'm using generative AI. I talked about the popular chatbot, ChatGPT, and emphasize that technology has and continues to shape how we teach and what we teach. In Power of Open, Jeff Gumez defined open for us and had us reflecting on how generative AI introduces new questions about intellectual property and originality. In Making It Work, we heard from educational professionals and they shared the ways they're using AI, mostly ChatGPT, in their work to assess, engage, and educate learners. And that brings us to today, a really important conversation about how we keep humans in focus in light of these technological advancements, and specifically what it means for teachers to teach with AI and about AI. So there's an important duality that teachers face, and arguably non-teachers, as I've been talking to some colleagues who are not in the education field, when it comes to keeping humans in focus as we all leverage and navigate this new landscape with AI. And that's the fact that we have to think about how we're teaching with AI, along with how we're teaching about AI. And within both of those questions are how we do those in an equitable and ethical manner. So if I'm teaching with AI, there's an equity focus that I need to have, and that same focus needs to be included in what I teach about AI. And while I realize that equity is often a component that's included within ethical frameworks, I have separated it out here because I think it's especially important in this topic to treat it somewhat separately, since it's such a big part of the conversation. So today we will talk about keeping humans in focus. We're going to talk about a few of the problems that generative AI introduces and opportunities that we have as educators in light of those problems. And I'm going to also talk about what I am referring to as an adult education imperative, and what I think is probably the most important thing about this whole conversation. Yeah, well, we'll get to that. So problems and opportunities. So I know that we put out the survey last week and we got a lot of great responses about kind of what you believe to be the potentials and pitfalls of this technology. And it was really interesting and has continued to be interesting to see those responses come in. And I think that it's fair to say that we all share a very similar perspective on what the problems with this technology, or the potential problems, are, and with the fact that it also holds a lot of potential in terms of assisting us in our work and being capable of accomplishing a lot. I'm going to check on the chat just to make sure nobody's having any issues. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Looks like everybody's just saying hi. So good to see you all. So glad you could join us today. So to start, I want to revisit, this is actually a slide, if you recall, from the very first webinar, Zero to Hero. And I explained during that webinar that it's helpful to kind of think of these three components that contribute to how this technology works. And those are the data sets, the large data sets, the deep learning or machine learning algorithms that are applied to those data sets, and then of course the human users that are actually using the technology. So while we, I had that slide where human users was the only component with a human in the image. But I think today, while we're putting humans in focus, we should acknowledge that humans are a part of every piece of this puzzle. And as human users, we are often encountering frustrations and problems with some results that we get from generative AI. Those pain points can be traced back to the algorithms and science behind the systems. So especially how little we know about how those systems work, which were ultimately designed by, of course, humans. They can also be traced back to the data sets that the systems are trained on, namely that they reflect the perspectives of a limited group of people, humans, typically white Westerners, and are not representative of the diversity of humanity as a whole. And so let's always think about the fact that it's humans that are behind all of these components. Therefore, we can humanly connect and communicate and create systems where we are all happy with how each component is working. But also important to note that anything that we're experiencing in terms of output is not just an issue with a machine. It's actually an underlying issue of how the machine has been developed and designed. So as an example of what I was referring to in terms of the data sets, the lack of representation in the data sets, what you're seeing now is from a study, Stable Bias, Analyzing Societal Representations in Diffusion Models. And you can kind of just see from these images, if you take a moment to look at them, that there are certain stereotypes being expressed through what a text-to-image generator is giving you, depending on how you prompt it. So I just want to give you guys a minute to kind of look at these images. This is a really great report. And of course, we'll share it out in the follow-up after this webinar so that you can read the full paper or even just kind of interact with some of the cool elements that they have shared out. So you see reflected in the data set, well, you see the data sets are the starting point, right? And then what is in those data sets ultimately gets reflected in the output. So there's an opportunity here as educators. And I actually just was in a meeting this week and heard this quote from someone. I thought, aha, that's it right there. That's what is so crucial here. And I'm just going to read the quote. It's from Stacey Holiday from Jobs for the Future. Shout out to Stacey, who participates in the Create Adult Skills Network as a working group member. And she said, thinking about the equity impact for learners, the limitations we're enforcing if our focus is on building skills that can be applied as passive consumers of knowledge, compared to the ability to construct and share knowledge. And I think that's a really great way of expressing that the crux of what we can do as educators, right? We're not putting the data sets together. We're not developing the technology, but there is something that we can do. And it is to focus on enabling learners and assisting learners in constructing and sharing knowledge and shifting away from learners being passive consumers of knowledge. So here's a couple of ways that we can do that. We can engage learners as contributors. There are actually a lot of websites out there that crowdsource images, voices, and stories from anyone. Howtopronounce.com. This is a great website that we used in an EdTech makerspace recently. And they crowdsource the pronunciation of words so that different accents and dialects are represented in those pronunciations. There's also a website called Mozilla's Common Voice, where you can actually contribute to the development of AI technology by recording your voice reading a sentence. You can type sentences in. It's just a really great way to kind of feel as like an active participant in the development of technology. So learners can be contributors in that way. Learners can also be leaders, and we all know this, I know that, but there's a few different specific ways I wanted to highlight here. As publishers, right? So if we are concerned that the data set is not representative of the stories of our learners, we should be encouraging them to be publishers and creators of content. One great way they can do that is by sharing their stories with the Change Agent magazine, which publishes the stories of adult learners. They can also participate in COABE Students as Leaders initiative. And if you want to hear more about that, you could listen to the podcast Advocast. And then they can also engage in technology research. In the Create Adult Skills Network, we are researching different technology interventions that impact adult learners. And I know many of those research teams are engaging directly with adult learners. So as teachers, it's important that we think about the different ways that we are helping our learners' voices be heard and their stories be heard. These are just some ways, and I know you guys have a lot of other strategies and ways that you're going about this as well. But I think that's a really important part of the story when we talk about the data sets being biased, is that we encourage learners to share their work. So that's a problem and an opportunity. The problem being biased data resulting in biased output, and the opportunity being to ensure that learners are having agency and able to share their experiences and stories. Another problem is transparency. Oops, problem with this slide. There we go. Oh wait, no, now it's, no, okay, we'll go back, no problem. Okay, there we go. The problem is transparency. So another frustration that we encounter is the level of transparency about the technology itself. So you'll hear the term black box, and it refers to the lack of information that developers provide in terms of how the technology is working. So take a look at the buttons on the right side of my slide here. The Canva Assistant, I Can't Draw, GPT-4. What do you notice about all of these buttons? Do they have anything in common? Sparkly stars, stars. Sparkly stars, 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 stars. What do the stars mean? We should ask that question. What do the stars mean? Yeah, you'll notice, like, anytime that a new AI-enabled feature is built into a tool that you use, suddenly that feature has stars on it. And I think that those stars are part of the problem. I'm not against stars. I use the sparkle emoji constantly. I like it. But it gives the illusion that the technology is magical and mystical, when in reality, it's based on science, math, statistics. So it's, you know, we have to kind of demystify the technology and not act like it's a magical solution. Sorry, you guys. Okay. Sorry, thanks for the hearts. You know, summer just started. School's let out and everything's going crazy. We'll edit that out of the recording. So anyway, yes, they want us to believe that this technology is mystical, but in reality, it can be understood, and we want information about it. And the fact is that it impacts our lives, and we should be able to understand it on a better level than we can right now, and more of an explanation than sparkly stars. And so the blueprint, the White House's blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights actually addresses this. One of their guiding principles is notice and explanation. And the principle states that you should know that an automated system is being used and understand how and why it contributes to outcomes that impact you. So this is primarily directed toward the confusing and lengthy terms of service that we rarely read. I rarely read them. I don't know about you guys. And it's saying that those are not sufficient. It's not a sufficient means by which people should be informed about automated systems within a tool that they're using. So the White House calls for those to be written in accessible, plain language, which I think is important. It's important too, though, that we see that as educators, we should be equally transparent about the ways that we are using those tools in our classroom and how we're letting them inform the next steps that we take with learners, right? So we should be transparent about how we're using automated systems. And that means letting students know when we're teaching with AI, maybe saying ChatGPT is helping me grade the paper that you turned in. And we should be teaching about AI. By the way, ChatGPT isn't always accurate, and I will double check its results, right? So that same notice and explanation, while it's crucial that the tech developers who are getting so much money from this technology provide that notice and explanation, we as educators also have a responsibility to provide that notice and explanation. Which leads me to what I am calling an adult education imperative. So we've gone over some of these problems and opportunities. And I think that the remaining problems and opportunities can be addressed through a single imperative, which is digital inclusion, okay? So if we look at more problems and opportunities presented by the technology, one is the ease of spreading misinformation. That's a huge concern. And a solution to that concern is IS.3, evaluate online information. Someone tell me in the chat if you know what these little turquoise boxes are referring to. Another issue we have is data privacy and security concerns, right? So if I am sharing a bunch of images of myself with an AI system so that it can give me a cool avatar, there's a concern there that they now have my pictures. If I am sharing with it the ages and names of my children so that it can create a food plan for me, there's a concern there that I'm sharing too much information. That concern can be addressed through PS.3, limit sharing of personal data. And Dr. Jen Vanek in the chat got it exactly right. Those are from a digital skills framework, specifically the Seattle Digital Equity Initiative framework. But my point here is that by addressing critical digital skills that learners need, we are also addressing this bigger question around AI and navigating a world with AI. So there's really like a root and crux of the issue here, which is digital inclusion. And if we can address that, we in turn can address so many of the things that we're encountering with AI. Not everything, I'm not saying it'll fix everything, but I think it's a really important piece of the puzzle. So when we talk about the human users and the adult learners that are using AI, we need to ensure that they have agency. They're allowed to choose which tools they want to use and how those tools are going to determine next steps or outcomes for them. We need to ensure that they are represented, whether it's them being part of building data that systems are trained on, whether it's them being part of focus groups where someone is developing a technology, or whether it's sitting in the classroom and seeing themselves represented on a slide that their teacher is sharing. We need to ensure that they are represented in their educational experience. We also need to ensure that adult learners have the literacy that they need to participate in a society where we are leveraging AI in so many of our tools and in so much of our work. We need to ensure that adult learners have access to the internet and devices that they need in order to also fully participate in that society. And so those two second things address what we know to be the digital divide. And so when we talk about teaching specifically about AI, but even teaching with AI, right, this all connects to the digital divide. If we're teaching with AI, do learners have the access and understanding of what we're using to be able to fully participate? If we're teaching about AI, that's really where we can address developing those skills. So this brings us to what's known as the skills divide, the digital skills divide, and the National Skills Coalition recently put out a really excellent report highlighting this divide and why it's so important. Across industries, they found 92% of jobs require digital skills. And we now are encountering a whole entire new set of skills that learners will need, and possibly not discrete skills. In fact, I think in some ways, generative AI is going to make it easier to use machines. I think we're going to be relying less on our ability to type and move a mouse. So that's a good thing. But there's a whole set of new AI literacies that come with that. Understanding algorithms, artificial intelligence, automation, bias, chatbots, data, machine learning, misinformation. These are new terms that we are encountering and that learners need to be taught about. So we have to address that there is a digital skills divide, and those digital skills are changing. And how will we address that in our classrooms? I want to share this resource with you as well. Sorry, we're going to pause just for half a second. Okay, sorry, you guys. So I want to share with you the digital skills library and glossary. We have been adding artificial intelligence materials, like teaching materials, as well as terms to our glossary to assist you all in making sure that you can talk about artificial intelligence in your classroom and guide learners through this ever-changing landscape. We've created these through the Digital Resilience in the American Workforce Initiative, which is a really important initiative, especially right now, that is supporting programs and learners in building digital resilience that they need to navigate new technologies. So thank you, Jeff. Jeff just shared in the chat the digital skills glossary that we created with teachers in an EdTech makerspace. And I encourage you all to go to the digital skills library and you can submit a resource. So if you're finding new resources to teach learners about AI, please share them in the digital skills library. You can learn yourself in the digital skills library. So I know that we talk about learners a lot. We also need digital skills. I need many of them still. And then you can use it to teach, and then you can use it also to engage learners in the conversation. So I hope you guys will check out the digital skills library and glossary, and I hope it will help you as you are learning alongside your class and your learners about new technologies. And I'm going to go ahead and jump out of my slides for a second here because I want to share with you a website that we just created that we're going to be using to share news and resources about generative AI with you. So if someone could put the link in the chat, that would be great. We have launched a new website. It's called Leveraging AI for Learning and Work. And we're really excited to come alongside you in this journey of navigating what it means to leverage AI and finding resources that you need in order to leverage it effectively, ethically, and equitably. So it looks like, did we get it in the chat? Yes, it's in the chat. I hope you'll visit. And so what you'll find there is the survey. We disseminated a survey last week. We really want to hear from you and hear about how you're using these tools, what concerns you have, what potential you see in them. So please do fill out the survey. You can also find the link to get your badge for engaging in these webinars. And a link to see the playlist of the webinars. There are blogs, there's a podcast there. So we'll be keeping that updated with any work that we're doing in this space. So speaking of this space, how are you feeling now that I've presented new problems and opportunities for you to tackle? Is anyone feeling a little, I know that this is a lot of information. We have shared a lot during this webinar series, and this is a really new topic, and there are right now more questions than answers. So it can be dizzying at times. I find what always helps me, yes, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant, I know. What always helps me when I'm learning new things and wanting to feel a little more grounded and get my hands in them and start experimenting is to participate in an EdTech makerspace, or in this case, Camp GPT. We are really excited to start a summer camp, virtual. Don't worry, you don't need bug spray. But we're going to start a summer camp where we're going to gather educators together and we will play with these tools, experiment, learn together, and make things together, arts and crafts, my friends. So when you fill out the feedback survey that Zoom gives you, you will be able to indicate if you're interested. Of course, we'll share this information in our newsletters and everything as well, so you'll be able to sign up. You won't miss it. But if you do fill out the follow-up survey, there will be a place to put your email address to get more information about Camp GPT. I love seeing the excitement. Yay, I'm excited too. So like I said, Camp GPT, we're going to explore different tools, and we're going to be addressing really specific challenges that we face in adult education in terms of specific materials that we need and are hard to generate. And we'll see how generative AI helps us in that process. So we're really excited to engage you all in that and to really have a more interactive, hands-on experience with these tools. And I see a lot of talk about s'mores. I'll think about how we can get virtual s'mores. And that is it for today, my friends. I hope that this was informative for you. I hope it helped you think through some of the problems and opportunities that generative AI introduces.